So thank you so much, Akshat. I really appreciate this. As you know, I've been ranting about how terrible our education system is and why schooling is broken and why parents need to explore. But the reality is I'm a dinosaur sitting in an ivory tower, so no one pays any attention to what I say. Whereas you're actually homeschooling your kids. So what you say is going to have much more authenticity and credibility. And therefore, I'm really grateful to you for joining us. And I think parents have lots of questions and doubts and fears. So I'm going to ask you questions, difficult ones sometimes. So will you accept the fact that you're a bit of a maverick?
I don't know. And honestly, I don't bother putting labels to things. I simply do whatever makes sense, the most sense. I figure out the risk reward equation. And if the risk reward equation looks sensible to me, then I end up taking the risk, right? So that's how I make my investment decisions, career decisions, anything that I do. Now, of course, the question comes that, hey, why are you doing this for your kids? Because this is not my risk and reward. This is my kids' risk and reward. But see, honestly, if I put them in school, I see the risk reward, which does not look very favorable to me, given my circumstances. So I have to make a decision one way or the other. It's a binary decision, so to say, either to, sort of take them into formal schooling system versus not. So yeah, so doing that risk analysis kind of makes sense, which I'll go deeper into subsequently on our chat. But yeah, not putting any labels. I'm just simply doing it because the risk reward looks favorable to me, and that is how I have always made decisions. And my wife also luckily is on board with the entire idea. So yeah, so let's see how the journey transpires.
So the reality is, Akshat, most other parents are very scared about putting their kids out of school. I mean, they'll accept a terrible school, they'll complain and moan and whine about how terrible the teachers are and how expensive the fees are, and how the teaching is going from bad to worse, but they won't actually do anything about it. Why is that?
Honestly, that I think we are just limiting the question to schooling, but I think that's applicable for literally anything, that people are just scared of the risk. And again, I'll just go back to the risk reward equation, that people don't see the reward, people don't understand how to mitigate risk, people do not do the analysis whether they will be able to execute this step. This is not only applicable for sending or not sending kids to school. This applies to literally anything, right? Anything worth doing involves risk, right? So, and people do not analyze the risk properly or don't have a framework to do it. So they just go with the most convenient option.
So why is there assumption that the risk for sending your kid to a traditional school is less than the risk of homeschooling your kid?
Okay, so I'll try to be blunt here. So for example, if your kid grows up and for some reason they are messed up in their career, and they turn around and say that, what, my career got messed up because of you, you can always say, we sent you to the best school. But in my case, if my kid's career get messed up, what response would I have, right? So here the accountability is 100% on me. I can't put it off on the school per se. I'm not saying that all parents do that, but I think that's a convenient option, so to say, right? You can always put the accountability on someone else, right? In that respect. So I think it's a very tough conversation, right? It will pan out for me after 13, 14 years. So I'll let you know how it goes. But yeah, I think that would be one of the key reasons why parents might not end up taking that leap of faith, because the entire accountability then lies on you.
So you made a decision which is very different from the decision which other parents make. Yeah. So obviously you're thinking differently, you're being contrarian. What gave you the courage? What were the calculations you used in order to make that risk reward calculation?
See, to be honest, I am in a privileged position, so to say. So the first time we spoke, I gave a snippet to that, right? And I am speaking from a place of privilege, so to say, right? That I'm doing okay in my career. I can create a safety net for my kids. I work from home. I get to travel whenever I want to travel. I can take my kids along. I can bear those expenses. Many times people or parents think that homeschooling is cheaper. It is not, right? It is not as inexpensive as we are making it out to be. It can be extremely expensive, right? Which again I can get into. But to cut the long story short, right? Honestly, I'm in a privileged position. I can set those baselines और absolute safety nets कि जहाँ पे कुछ नहीं हुआ तो कुछ तो कर ही लेंगे वाली चीज, right? So I think that, so setting the safety net, now for me, my goal as a parent would be to give my kids the best opportunities, and I don't see that in the formal schooling system. So for me, it's a no-brainer choice that I'll have to
So let me ask you one question, Akshat. Suppose you didn't have this, what you're calling privileged position. Would you then still have the guts to make the same step?
Yes. So, so let me just quickly clarify what do I mean by homeschooling. So, homeschooling to me does not mean that, completely not send them to school ever, right? Or completely, make them like antisocial elements, just lock them in a room or something like this. No, it doesn't work that way. Basically, it's a combination of formal plus informal education. Formal in the sense, for example, if you're putting your kids in a music class, right? Now, they can go to that music class within a schooling system, or you can just simply there must be, like, if you're living in Goa or if you're living in Delhi or Mumbai, wherever, there will be teachers that you will find outside the schooling system where you can put your kid, right? So it's a combination of formal plus informal education, I would say, right? In that light, right? So trying to answer your question, that would I still do it? Probably yes, right? It's just that I'll have to put in more structures. Number two, I'll have to run the assessment. How much time can I or my partner, my wife, will be able to spend with our kids? Because practically speaking, if you want to homeschool your kids, then one of you need to be there, right? Extensively. So doing that time assessment would have been a critical job, right? So had I been in a situation where both my wife and I are working, almost whatever, like 12-13 hours a day, something, right? Then of course we can't do it, right? So when it's as simple as that, even like dropping your kid to a music class, bringing them back itself is a challenge. So in that respect, I would not have homeschooled my kids, right? Now, because I have the time to do it, therefore I can do it, right? अब बीच में कहीं हो जाता है कि if I have a flexible job, if if my partner is not working, I am working, or vice versa, then would I have explored homeschooling, keeping aside the safety nets? Yes, I would have still done it.
So I think what's interesting is that people often come from a position of fear and scarcity. Is there only a limited number of schools? I need to make sure that I send my kid to this particular school. And a lot of people say that, the tragedy is that your both husband and wife are working practically full time at a job, of which nearly 30% to 40% of what they earn just goes in paying for education fees. School fees, bus fees, tuition fees, all that other stuff. And the quality of education they're getting is pretty terrible. So in one sense, if you decided not to go to a crappy job and perhaps spend more time with your kid at home, you might earn a little bit less, but I think actually the quality time and the amount of parenting you'd be able to do hands-on would actually be better. Do you think I'm just talking theory? Because a lot of jobs are BS jobs. They all get capped. They don't give you any joy. And you kind of, hey, I'm on the treadmill, but I need to do this for the sake of my kid. But is that really?
Yes and no, right? So yes, in the sense that, yes, theoretically that makes sense, but practically it's very difficult to leave a job. That's you need massive safety net, especially nowadays, to leave even a bad job, right? Because the way typically people would think is that, what, boss, I have like two income streams. One income stream will go away. What will I do? Especially if you have taken loans to buy a house, whatnot. Then be that as it may, no matter how sad your job is, you will still have to do it, because at the end of the day, you have to pay one salary for EMIs for your house, and the second salary you're running a household, right? So I mean, practically you can't leave it. So yes, that's my answer to that.
But I that's what I'm saying. So that's why people are coming from a position of fear, because that salary, that second salary which you get, so much of it is going away into pretty mindless education of poor quality, that perhaps if you found an alternative, not only would you save money, your kid would get a better education. And here's a suggestion, and I'd love your opinion on this. Suppose 4 or 5 parents in a neighborhood or a community got together and said, look, this is not making any sense at all. We're terribly unhappy. All we need is a room with, let's say, 100 square feet with 4 or 5 PCs, and 5 of our kids will get together, could be different age groups. So you're saving money on commute, tuition fees, college, school fees, everything else. And you're helping them to learn for themselves, so that perhaps one parent once a week rotates and therefore, you still continue doing your job. But the quality time which you're spending on supervising the kid, not teaching the kid, but supervising that kid in that classroom, which is really not a classroom because you're allowing kids to learn for themselves, becomes a micro school. Don't you think that would give you the best of all possible worlds? Again, I'm just thinking aloud. It's a thought experiment.
Yeah. See, honestly, like I think no, right? Why?
Please.
Because uh, I don't think in schooling or educating or your style of teaching your kids, democracy does not work, right? I mean, I think having like focus what you want to do, how you want to do it, having an action plan works much better compared to doing something democratically. One example I'll give you are society meetings. Probably the worst use of anyone's time to go to society meetings. Nothing get accomplished there, right? I mean, there is how society secretary you will.
The trouble is you don't have a choice with who the other members in your society are. Here, when you're teaming together with a group of 4 or 5 parents who perhaps think the same way and who can see the advantage, which means the amount of money they would collectively save on their school fees. Let's say it's 15,000 a month you're spending. That's about 60 or 70,000 a month you're putting in a kitty, which you're then using to educate 4 or 5 kids. I think that equation perhaps would be slightly different. I don't know. I'm just saying that sometimes people. Go ahead.
So I'm more the way I would just slightly refine this would be very simple. That, for example, let's say that I want to send my kids to a music class, right, and a language class. I don't want to hypothetically send them to a sports class or XYZ classes. Then okay, fine, 5 people come together. Now usually what happens is that there is a one on many trainers that come. For example, in my society there's a pool and a trainer comes and he teaches 3 kids, right? So that you can split the cost of those private lessons, right? So figuring out, okay, these are like 5 classes that are going on. 5 parents can come together that, okay, you know what, I want to enroll my kids for class 1, 2, 3, not 3, not 4 and 5, right? Then I can make a decision, okay, 1, 3 and 5 I will do. So I think this is a more refined version where I get complete autonomy as to figure out that what works for my kid versus not. And the second parent also does that. So I think this model works better. The second model, where if I have to sort of brainstorm with other parents on how to build ideas, is that so then it becomes like a full-time job. I'm not interested.
So here's another alternative. Out of these 5 parents, one of them already is an educated stay-at-home mom who's decided I don't want to go work because I'm happy at home, but I'd rather be at home, or I can't find, or whatever else. So now this one individual parent takes responsibility and says, the schooling system's crappy anyway. I don't want to put my kid in a second. Because with the moment you put a kid in school, you lost all autonomy. Let's not forget that. Or maybe she's sending a kid to school and a kid is miserable and she's miserable and the kid comes back crying all the time. So she says, you know what, I'm going to educate my kid anyway, some cost. But I'm also going to offer this option to 4 other kids in the neighborhood. So now the other parents are saying, great, this is a mom who's our neighbor. So obviously she has skin in the game. She's educating her kid. She can talk to our kids. We see her every day. She's not unapproachable like school management or school teachers. It's the same thing. And the point is, she's not a BEd teacher. She's going to allow kids to learn for themselves. And the scaffolding and the structure which you're talking about is already available online, whether it's Khan Academy, whether it's whatever else, or it's completely random. The point is that then not only is this mother earning money for herself, it's a source of income, which is great for her self-esteem because she's doing it from home. She's also helping the other moms to save money and improve the quality of the education their kids are getting. Tell me why that's a bad one. Suppose your wife decided, fine, this is what I want to do. And, everyone else in the community, in the neighborhood respects her. Or even you, for example, why your wife? Suppose tomorrow you decided, you know what, I've done enough of this, or I want to spend. And the beauty about homeschooling is the amount of time you need to spend with your kids for academic learning is actually just 3 or 4 hours, because you don't need to waste the entire 8 hours of a school day. Why would you say no to that?
Right. Actually, multiple points there, right? So I'll try to just state it in points. So number one, right? I don't think it's a generalist game, that there is no one such thing as homeschooling. It's a specialist game. That, for example, if I am really good in structured thinking, for example, because I come from management consulting background, and if you want your kid to learn structured thinking from me, now that's an area that I can possibly teach, right? Similarly, if you ask them to ask me to teach them chemistry, I just detest chemistry. I was always bad at it, right? And I would probably do a horrendous job teaching chemistry to someone, right? So that part, if I want my kid to learn chemistry, I have to find a specialist, right? So then we have
No,
to,
wait,
then we
wait.
get into
Is
like
it
the
okay
second
if I
part. Yeah,
interrupt you? Because, I
yeah,
think
sure,
one
sure.
of the reasons I'm having this conversation is I want to disagree and disagree in public. The whole point of this is that you're
Yeah,
not teaching your kid anything. You're allowing
yes.
your kid to learn from the world's best chemistry teachers, all of whom happen
Yeah,
to be on Khan Academy anyway. And suppose
yes.
your kid is, let's say, 12 years old and doesn't understand valences or bonds or whatever else. There is
Yeah,
someone else in the neighborhood who's 14 years old who loves chemistry, who will then teach your kid. So
right.
you've taken away the authority gradient, you've taken away the bad teachers, you've created student to student learning, so that good students have always been the best teachers. We know that. So the onus of actually teaching has gone away. It's your kid
Right.
who's now, and the confidence your kid is going to get. Because, hey, I can figure this out for myself. And if I can't, I'll go to another YouTube channel or I'll ask my friends or whatever else. Will actually give them a lot more confidence. So I'm actually not asking you to teach them even structured learning. You may be great at it. You may be a physicist, but I don't even care about your teaching the kids physics. I want you to let them learn. Why do you think that won't work?
No, absolutely. I agree with that, right? So just refining it further, I think there are two parts to it, right? So one is the core learning part, right, which you can definitely do it online, be it whether you want to learn Japanese, Chinese, or like physics, chemistry, etc. That can always be done. That's not an issue. The second part is creating an environment to learn, right? Because kids are indisciplined, right? I mean, if you just make them watch Cocomelon, for example, my kid watches Cocomelon, he can watch it for 4 hours if you let him. So, but my job is to create an environment where uh, he's not watching Cocomelon for 4 hours, right? Now, that's my job, right? So I have to create a learning ecosystem, right? So that's what. So how do I do that, right? So my theory there is that you have to lead by example, right? So one of the strategies for me is very simple, that hey, I started my YouTube channel because I wanted my kids to learn finance economics. Now over time I have gravitated towards making some case studies, this that kuch bhi nahi hoga to yaar, at least they will go and watch my YouTube channel, and do teen case studies they will pick and at least be interested in it. Now if my goal, if I see that what, I want my kids to start making videos, now what's the best way for me to do it? Okay, it's to involve them, right? That's mentorship based learning, right? So for example, I'll call them up, right? I'll make one video with them or whatever it is, right? I'll handhold them. My job is to generate interest for them. So which is how I'm tagging it as creating an environment, right? And third is measuring that environment, right? I mean, in the sense that, for example, we have school test, which measures, right? I mean, if you are taking a test, if you're scoring really well, it will probably give you confidence, etc., etc. Right? So these are like three
So
areas
here's
that
my
I would look
pushback.
at.
Here's my pushback to all three. If you think
Yeah.
school creates a learning environment, you're kidding yourself. So definitely,
I'm not defending school, right?
no, but then ultimately that's the choice which parents have. Yes, I want a great, safe learning environment, and right now, according to me, the only learning environment is a school. And also, on one hand, you're saying it's a terrible learning environment. So you can create a better alternative. Coming back again to what you're saying, I think a learning environment which has a safe space, safe both physically and psychologically, because you have a loving parent, could be a neighbor or whatever else, who's not going to bully you or force you to do anything you don't want to do. I think that safety is important. You're learning from other kids in the room. So there's a lot of social emotional learning. And like you quite correctly said, you're saying, hey, this is where the best videos are. And you know what, darling, if you're stuck, let's watch this video together. Or you know what, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that question either, but let's figure it out. The point is that you are creating a role model for helping kids to ask better questions and helping them to figure out the answers for themselves, not by spoon feeding them, but by telling them, look, the answers are all online. The answers may be on Google, YouTube, university, wherever else, it doesn't matter. I will help you find the answers for yourself. I will not tell you what the answer is. And then when you start doing that, and let's come back again to your two other things about what will happen if your kid plays video games all day. I think, remember one thing, I think a lot of what kids learn comes from intrinsic motivation or curiosity.
Yeah.
And there is, to a large extent, ability to be able to channel curiosity or intrinsic motivation on the part of the parent. And a good parent does that all the time because there's so many teaching moments during a day. You're watching TV, you're going out for a walk, you're going for a travel, you ask these questions. The problem is now when our kids ask us questions, what is our standard answer? Too busy, don't ask me, whatever else it is. Whereas here, you're taking advantage and say, hey, that's a great question. Why don't we look it up together? So I think that it's possible in a closed room with very few kids, with one adult supervisor, to be able to create that learning environment. Tell me why you disagree.
I don't disagree. That model doesn't work for me, right? So that's what I'm trying to tell you. See, I'm not an expert in homeschooling, right? And neither I'm trying to project that. All I know is that what is going to work for my kid, right? And given my situation, right? So, for example, there are areas that I know I'm good at, which I can teach my kids. I know that I can spend more time with them. I know I can travel a lot with them. Automatically they pick up a lot of things, right, when we travel,
which you don't. But the point is, then you don't test them, you don't check, hey, what did you do? You don't make them write an essay, which is what school does.
Right.
Which is why kids hate school and they hate learning. Whereas when you're using a Socratic method with them, when you're asking them questions, why don't we figure this out? Why don't we do this? Why don't we create a scrapbook? Because they choose to do it. They're actually learning far more than any test could possibly measure.
Correct, right? It's all about like adapting to whatever is happening around you, right? For example, right now with AI, Chat GPT, right? I mean, honestly, like you can, if you are asking better questions, you will get better response, right? So it's garbage in, garbage out, right? And good data in, good data out, right? So I mean, that is the world we are moving towards. So it's again very similar to statistics, right? So for example, if I teach finance and economics, I don't necessarily need to be a statistician. I just need to be a better consumer of statistics, right? Understanding that point is where practical learning, practical execution comes in, vis-a-vis school learning, school execution comes in, right? So going forward, this is very critical, right? I mean, if I see, right, I mean, that my kid is good at, let's say, mathematics, his bent is there, then I would know that, okay, there is one. So what I plan on doing with my kids, I'll just, say maybe like one or two more points. So it might set the context straight. So I feel that at every stage, just for context, my son is 4, my daughter is 1. So we are not homeschooling my daughter yet. She's too young.
But you are.
The idea with my son is that, number one, right? I mean,
no, but that's the one thing parents don't realize. You're actually teaching your kid all the time. The moment your kid was born, you're teaching your kid. You're responding to your kid. And the amount the kid learns before the kid goes to school in those 3 years is perhaps far more than that kid will learn in 12 years of schooling. So I think parents are primary educators and always have been. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with you. सीख रही है बच्ची, हाँ. Learn कर रही है, हाँ. Our word for learning is schooling, which I think is ridiculous, but it happens to be. और घर पे सीख रही है. So in that sense, you are homeschooling her without a teacher certificate. But obviously, parents are the best. But okay, let's carry on. Sorry. So you were saying, I think you're homeschooling.
Right. So
okay, fine.
Right. So since my son is 4, right, I understand what are the major levers of learning, right, at age 4, right? So if I have to point out 3 or 4 key things, number one, at age 4, my son learns through stories. That is what fascinates him. He can listen to stories all day. Number 2, he wants to play all day long. So if I make anything a competition, he will participate in it. For example, if I tell him, what 5 things did you do today, right? So I mean, he'll tell me that, okay, these are 5 things. It will make him think, right? So that enhances his memory, so to say. Third is language, right? So for example, if I can just expose him to, let's say, 3 languages, right? So which is what my goal right now is, that he learns a little bit of Spanish. English he can speak fluently. So he had been speaking English fluency since the time he was 2.5. So that's
you taught him. With him. You taught him. Oh, let me rephrase. Right? I said, let me rephrase that. I don't think you taught him. I think he learned.
Yeah, he learned himself. Yes.
So he learns. Exactly. I think kids naturally learn by immersion based on that environment which you provided. And because you're such a thoughtful and a caring parent, which, let's be honest, no school could possibly match, because a school teacher has 45 kids or 30 kids or whatever in that classroom. Whereas you're actually respecting your kids' individuality. But go on.
Yes. So language learning is something that we are exposing him to, right? And the third key thing would be that, so for example, we are putting him, we live in Goa, so he's learning a little bit of Konkani. We, with our house help, etc. She speaks Konkani with him, so he picks up a little bit of words here and there. Spanish we teach him, so we are just exposing him to different languages. That's the idea right now, right? And making everything a competition, right? So I mean, in the sense, ki, acha, chalo, tell me like these 5 things that you did today. Who will tell faster, or name 5 plants, or something like this, right? So it's always like fun to learn that way, right? Through stories.
Akshat, I think there are 2 things. One is you're underestimating what a good teacher you are for your kid. The point is you don't need a BEd degree to teach your kid. And you're going to be far better than possibly anyone else because you love your kid and you spend so much time and you understand your kid's strengths. And that's really what makes him flourish, and that's what makes him thrive. The point is that this is what you're doing today because he's 4, but this is not what you're going to do when he's 8. Because he will reinvent himself, he will change, he will have additional. But because you're not rigid and you're not saying, okay, today this is the 8th standard, you need to learn geography, you need to learn history, you will automatically allow him to learn for yourself. And that's exactly what we're trying to highlight, which should happen. Because a lot of concerns, so there are 2 concerns a lot of parents have. They say, okay, theek hai, abhi to bacha chota hai, abhi to I can handle. How will he make friends? How will he learn to socialize? How do you answer that?
I think kids, number one, right? I mean, as we were speaking, that put him in different classes, so that allows them to make friends, right? That's point 1. Point 2 is that make them a better human being, right? I mean, the idea is not to make like too many friends. The idea is to be a good human being. So wherever you go, people gravitate to you. Right? So that's the idea, right? And the idea is not, you should have like 5 friends in the society and 5 friends in school and 5 friends in space Y, right? So that's not the idea, because that friend circle will keep on changing. If I ask you, right, I mean, at this stage in your life, how many friends do you have that were there with you in class 3? The answer would be very few, maybe, right? So always the circle keeps changing. The idea is to make them the type of a human who is who is affable, who is nice, right? Who is not who lets other people speak, who has the ability to listen, who has the ability to put across rational thought process, who has the ability to think broadly, entertain opposite thought process. So these are like basic things that anyone should have, right? And I think making friends is an outcome of this, right? So it's not as if that, you absolutely need to make like 5 friends today or something. It doesn't work that way, right? So so that's what I would say. I don't know whether that answers the question, but yeah.
Actually, it does very well. Because I think the whole problem with school is that you're in a classroom with 25 other friends who happen to be the same age and perhaps are equally immature or perhaps equally whatever, whereas your ability to learn from the real world when you have people who are older and younger is obviously going to be far more. The other common question people have is, okay, theek hai, right now Akshat is managing, his kid is young. What happens when his kid wants to go to college?
I don't know, right? I mean, honestly, like looking at the situation right now of colleges, I don't know what will happen to colleges by that point in time when my kid actually grows up. But idea again is to have those foundational skills built really well, right? So one of the foundational skills by the time your kid is probably like 12, 13, right? And this is something that if I retrospect, this is what I would have wanted for me, would be that number 1, I can speak multiple languages. Number 2, I can learn things on my own really fast. Number 3, I can understand how to go through tough times. That is resilience, right? So for example, if it's completely okay to acknowledge the fact that you're not good at mathematics, you're good at Y, right? And accordingly structuring it, setting your baseline on mathematics and excelling at something else. So having that understanding, what McKinsey does typically is that they grade you on a chart, right, of 4 or 5 foundational skills. So that's typically what you should also start doing and evaluating at every juncture in your life. Finally, ability to pivot, right? Because honestly, you don't know how you will change as a person. For example, when I was younger, I was a really slow learner, right? I mean, I had really hard time picking things quickly, but once I picked something up, I was really good at applying. Now, because I've done it over and over and over again, now my ability to learn has become sharper, right? But I don't know, like the scientific research on it, but typically it would be said that, your ability to learn thing is fastest in the first 10 years, something like this. I don't feel that, right? I mean, for me, my ability to learn would be the fastest now when I'm almost 36, right? So yeah, so I mean, I think these are like 5, 6 key skills that need to be built. And of course, this needs to, even I need to think through it. I did not come up with a prepared curriculum at this stage, but
I
it's
think that's
always about learning.
I think everything you're saying is so spot on, because our whole idea of a prepared curriculum in school is a academic curriculum which matches to the exam system, so that your entire goal is to maximize the number of marks you can get in the exam, so that you can get into a good college, so that you can get into a good job. But the reality is, by the time your kid is 15, this world will have reinvented itself so dramatically. And because you're teaching these kids these valuable skills of being agile and flexible, he will not be stuck in the past like I think most other kids are. But one of the questions, how is it so easy for you to convince your wife? Because most men are saying, obviously this makes a lot more sense. Yes, we should try this out. And a lot of wives say, yeah, okay for you to give me a lecture, but I'll be stuck sitting at home doing the kid while you're gallivanting off away. So why should this be an additional burden I should take on?
Right. Honestly, it's not a point about convincing, right? Even my wife sees value in homeschooling. As I said previously, that because we have probably a bigger safety net, right? It's easier for us.
It's a financial safety.
We have time.
Right,
yes, financial safety net. Both of us come from an academic / teaching backgrounds, right? So I used to teach for GMAT. That's how I started my career. My wife has been in and out like an economist. She works with Government of India as an economist. So she also has a fairly academic bent. So therefore we feel that, there will be a lot of challenges, but we will be able to navigate it. So it's okay. It's worth taking a risk. So let's take the risk and see how it pans out.
And what
because
about
honestly, the bar is like really low, right? I mean, because we see, right? I mean, one of the key problems that we haven't discussed yet is the kind of very microscopic ecosystem that school ends up creating. For example, if you go to the best international school in your city, what type of kids are you exposing your kid to? Just one tiny spectrum of the world, right? They would have, it's like, the Dubai micro bubble, right? I mean, if you have forever lived in Dubai and if you are suddenly sent to Rajiv Chowk one day in Delhi, you will be crushed by the crowd, right? So I mean, that's how it will be, right? So you need to have both the experiences of traveling in a metro at Rajiv Chowk at 9:30 in the morning, 10:30 in the morning, and living in Dubai, so to say, right? So I mean, those two, once you have seen, then you appreciate the world more, right? It's grass always looks greener on the other side, but the idea is to see the grass from both sides and make a call which is greener or not, right? So that's the bottom line.
And the great thing about you is you're using the real world as a textbook for your child, because your child is actually learning from what is happening and you're willing to answer his questions. And I think that's something which obviously no school can ever possibly provide. So when you meet other parents, do they think you're a little bit of a crackpot?
It doesn't matter, right? I mean, I take like heat on social media all day, so it doesn't matter to me at all, right? So people don't say that to me on the face, right? I mean, people have much easier time saying online, but I mean, you know better than anyone, right? I mean, people would not say 99% of the things on your face, what they end up saying online. So since I'm already conditioned to it, it doesn't matter to me, even if someone says it to my face. Yeah.
I think that's great. And honestly, I think we need a lot more Akshats. And the reason I think we need a lot more Akshats in this country is I think this is going to have a trickle-down effect. There are going to be a few brave souls like you and your wife who are willing to understand that, the system is broken. There's a lot more I can do as a caring parent to fix it for my child or my children one at a time. And hopefully, baki log ka bhi tubelight kabhi na kabhi to bhi chapkega. I hope.
Absolutely. I think it needs to be made more convenient, right? So again, the Zomato story that people end up ordering so much stuff from Zomato simply because it is convenient. The day homeschooling becomes convenient is when people will actually start executing it. So I think encouraging MOOCs would be the first step on these lines, that creating some kind of a system, right, where this is done, right, really helps. Having some kind of structure. For example, if you go to Singapore, right? When I've lived in Singapore, so I see kids, right? I mean, even if at a food court they would come, they would study together, right? A bunch of 8-10 kids. So having like these type of open spaces that, hey, what learning can happen outside school also, that really makes things convenient for parents to execute these ideas. So,
I think part of it is our parental obsession with exam marks, our anxiety, mere bachche ka kya hoga, and I need to do everything. And so much of it is socially contagious, Because even if you're relatively sensible, when your neighbor starts talking, I think most parents start panicking. Oh God, this kid is speaking Mandarin and my kid can't even put together a straight sentence in this thing. So highly competitive all the time. And I think that bothers me a lot because people come from a position of scarcity. And I think in my time when I went to school, options are very, very limited for Indian parents. But I think in this day and age, when the world is your oyster and you have access to the same learning resources any kid anywhere in the world has, I actually think parents are being irresponsible by not exposing their kids to these resources. And the moment you send them to school, you're actually locking them up. So you're kind of constraining their future. And I think at some point, you were saying, I wonder what my kid will say after 10 years about the homeschooling and stuff. You know what my guess is? After 10 years, kids are going to complain to their parents. Why did you send me to school? Why did you send me to this? Because look what I did. I wasted all my life. I'm guessing. Because I think we still don't have enough of these counterfactual stories. And then when we'll have Akshat's kid doing extremely well, to hopefully be a role model for other people.
Because I don't think that will happen, to be honest, right? Because in college education, that's much easier to guess because you're going out with a very clear carrot at the end, right? Which is a job. But when it comes to schooling system, a class 5, 6, 7, 8 student, even if they are wasting their time, they would not realize it per se, right? So, so they would not know how to judge, are they truly wasting their time or not, right? I mean, a college student can probably make that call once they have graduated from college, but a school graduate, I don't think they will be able to ever guess that quality of education. So, yeah.
What about their parents? Don't their parents realize that's what they're doing? And when these kids...
But they will not be able to evaluate, right? It's very difficult to evaluate what goes on everyday basis, right? And schools are very nice in terms of embellishing things, right? That, hey, today we took them to like France, this 2-month trip or whatever it is, or 2-week trip or something like that, right? And all that stuff. So all those bells and whistles will be there, which looks very lucrative for parents. But honestly, it does not add much value, right? So, yeah, so that's my bottom line, right? But yes, I mean, a question that you did not ask me that, hey, if you were to send your kid to some school, what type of school it should be, right? So I will probably send them to Central School or something, right? So, yeah.
I think I'll have more questions. I'm sure people will watch this video and want me to ask more questions. I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to me, Akshat. Really, really appreciate this. And I will have more questions. Hopefully, I'll do this as your kid keeps on growing up as well and maybe do it with your kid.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.